I'm from Resonate Marketing Agency here on the Gold Coast. And today I'm going to talk to you about effective communications for sustainable practices in hotels. So, is it going to be greenwashing or green-led by some of your leaders in the hotels? The obvious answer should hopefully be green-led, led with a lot of transparency and evidence behind your message. And instead of potential temptations for some greenwashing, where you might be doing lots of beautiful things in regards to sustainability practices, and there's one thing that you get wrong and there's a backlash for it. So that's why this little rotten fruit can have the potential to spoil all the rest of the great work that you might be doing. So integrity is the key. So what are the benefits for the hotel owners, the motivations for you to do that? Where are they coming from, those drivers? They are typically coming from your investors, from an ESG goals point of view, from your hotel guests that want climate impact, and from the employees that value a culture of sustainability. And we obviously need some evidence for you to take actions on all these things. So I've gathered up some evidence from different sources related to those three areas that I've just mentioned before. And let's talk about them and get into them. The first one is from Expedia, and that was done this year in March by Wakefield, 11 participants and consumers. And the objectives of the research or the report was to find out what consumers consider as sustainable travel, what trade-offs are they willing to make to travel more sustainably, and where and how are they looking for information on these areas. So 40% on average are now in 2022 looking for sustainability answer to their travel destinations. That's a massive 10% increase in just 1 year. So the numbers are going up phenomenally. And the research also found that at least 90% of those respondents are wanting this information from a trusted source. So what do we mean by a trusted source? We're talking about their websites, their lodging providers, and transport providers, and their agency that helps them make the booking. And they want clear and concise messages with a lot of visual formats, and also touching on the travel impacts that their efforts to get to your destination is making on the environment. So a lot of transparency, basically. On to the next slide. So what are the typical questions that those guests are asking? They are wanting recommendations for locally owned businesses, transportation options with lower environmental impact, information on how to best engage and be active in your local community, even some volunteering. They are after some walkable and bikeable local activities, even how to pack sustainably. So if they are now asking to get involved with your local community, just an idea, if your hotel has a space and a facility, why don't bring once a week on a weekly basis those local businesses to your premises for them to be able to show off their services and things that they sell. So another definite presence of this data is about transparency and authenticity. So those consumers don't want the hotels to just use the words eco-friendly or eco-resorts. They want actual facts. But obviously, we want to be able to tell the story. We don't want to bore them with too many numbers. A recent study that just came out just last week, published in the Journal of Sustainable Tourism. And the beautiful thing about this story, if I minimize myself, it actually is looking at the climate crisis affecting tourism in different specific parts of Asia. And let's have a look at some takeaways. And they were that obviously climate change is specific to each region of Asia, and Asia, amongst other parts of the world, is one of the hardest hit regions. And the figures always also show that there is a mismatch in between the climate impact, the carbon emissions that are being emitted, and the action that are being taken against those emissions and the impact that is being made. So the effect will be with beach, ski, eco, heritage, urban, nature-based, coastal, or small island, that all apparently are bound to be affected unless things are done very soon. So coming all the way from the Gold Coast to Thailand and to be able to witness the beautiful coral reef at the Mo Kyu Surin National Park, this article that I found in Bangkok Post shows this terrible effects of climate change with the effect on the corals there. Another evidence of climate change in Sri Lanka, and this is a personal story. I grew up in a beautiful country called Mauritius, and this beach here is where we used to play this national sport on the beach called tennis volley, which is a combination of tennis and volleyball. And in that exact spot is where we used to, every Sunday with our friends, play this game. And have a look at now, at normal tide, there is no tennis volley course anymore. It's just been eroded by the coastal erosion. Something even closer to home, here on the beautiful Gold Coast, this is right in front of my place. This is the effect of the rain bomb that hung around southeast Queensland here about 4 or 5 months ago, and me going out just after the weather cleared to see the devastating effects on our beautiful beaches. Fires, drought in China here in summer 2022, and this recent luxury hotel in Pakistan just last week being swept away by the floods. So the evidence is there. Climate is changing. We need to act. We need to try and do something about it. Booking.com also had a report showing us, interestingly, that out of all the people that they surveyed, 31% of those responded didn't know of anything about sustainable accommodation, even existed, and how to find them. Out of those numbers, 56% admitted if there was some way or somehow for them to be able to see that evidence, they would want to then maybe consider it. So again, there is a lack of communication when it comes to sustainable measurements and measures in hotels availabilities. So the next slide shows that there's even some doubts in some of the guests about what sustainable travel even means. They might be doubting that maybe it might not satisfy their needs, and they might relate ecotourism to somewhere quite remote or less appealing as a destination. There is no doubt that the hotel industry is a massive user of power and electricity, and this is clearly shown here in this graph compared to industrial manufacturers. Depending on the size of resort, there's high use of electricity on the per daily use. Same thing with the use of water. From an ESG point of view, 75% of respondents that were surveyed said that ESG factors is now an important and even a deal breaker unless the hotels are reporting that. From a staff and employee point of view, we know how much of an issue talent search is these days post-COVID. 44% of those Gen Z and millennials that are being surveyed expect their employers to address climate change. So while hotels in the Asia Pacific region tend to be lagging in adopting some of those ESG sustainability targets, the consensus were summarized into those three challenges: inconsistent and invalid data, difficulty to measure success against goals, and lack of house sustainability expertise. Not too sure if you relate with that, but that's what the data says. Now, another big challenge is something called green hushing, which is the unwillingness to take a sustainable stance or measures for the sake of guest convenience, overall experience, and satisfaction levels. So not wanting the backlash of criticism when not able to substantiate their sustainability claims. So, and another question that's always asked, a challenge is, show me the return on investments. Now, we know that the construction and the building itself is more than 50% of the cause of that sustainability issue in hotels. So these are the figures that I found about some retrofits that was done in the hotel industry for all these items here on the left-hand side. And the investment required to carry out those renovations, the annual carbon savings in tonnes for these particular renovations, the annual savings as a result, and how long it took to pay these investments back in an average of 2 years. So that's not a lot of money for such a massive result when it comes to the CO2 emissions. So what's the answer here? We've spoken about the benefits. We've shown you the evidence. We've raised the challenges. So now what? So it's all about establishing these sustainability practices that are suited to your location, to your hotel, and then to effectively communicate that strategy to be able to motivate the individual stakeholders. So when it comes to a strategy, it's about content, it's about targeting, and it's about also the goals. So a good communication strategy involves setting clear goals that positively influence those targets, we are the investors, customers, and employees, by understanding the motivations of each of those stakeholders based on data, using resonating content and the appropriate channels to convey that message effectively. So what are the individual motivations of those guests? So as a guest, I want to maybe stay at a hotel that takes sustainability practice seriously and sets an example for me. As an investor, we want to invest in sustainable hotels that reflects our shareholders' views. And from an employee's point of view, as touched on previously, we want to work for a hotel that shares our values with sustainability and allows us to actually serve that as an example in our job roles. So what are the psychological motivation that enable behavior change when we're communicating those sustainability practices? So we need to emphasize the drivers, and we need to also address the barriers or the challenges to try and persuade the skeptics. So let's quickly go through some of those drivers. Those drivers could be tapping into the motivation of desire to help, the motivation of a sense of justice, the motivations of a sense of newness, of innovations, of relatedness or belonging, of obviously status and esteem and rank, which is one of the biggest motivation to get people to act from a marketing point of view, and a persuasive point of view, and then a motivation of pleasure. And when it comes to the barriers to try and motivate the skeptics, we're talking about freedom, we're talking about denial, we're talking about price, we're talking about tapping into heritage and nostalgia and tradition. We're tapping into patriotism with nationalism and the sense of community, and also post-COVID, making sure that the communication with cleanliness is also communicated effectively. So when it comes again to the strategies to communicate sustainability in hospitality, we've got two types: the verbal communications, which can be summarized under three sub areas. So with the verbal communication, where we want to be is accurate with our messaging. Again, not using fluffy words or confusing words that doesn't specifically actually portray what you're doing in your hotel. We want to be comparable, so letting our guests know where we were at last year, where we are now, how we compare, where our vision are. They just want you to be transparent where your goals are and where you're at now. And we want that message to be always on a positive side. We don't want to use a sense of guilt. From a non-verbal point of view, we want to use certifications. And that could be using organizations like EarthCheck. They've been around for many, many years. But for some hotels, that is too much, the whole process. It could even be the new initiative, hotel initiative, basics initiative that's been set up that has 12 points and is much easier to instill in your hotels. And you can even go for some of the certifications that the Expedias or the Googles of the world allow you to go through as well. So we want those communications also to be visible. So not only placing little signage in different parts of the hotel, also just focused in the rooms. We want, when we talk about visibility, we want to see gardens. We want to actually see lots of different physical activities in the hotels that the guests themselves can experience, and you can create tours around those as well. Obviously, we've touched on the importance of authenticity quite a lot so far, and the final point there is being internalized. Just like customer experience, it needs to start with the staff. So the staff needs to be vested in the values of sustainability. They need to live it, they need to breathe it, they need to embrace it, they need to be energized to be able to tell the story. And when you are ready to do that, you can go out and actually communicate that to the world and to your guests. So now I'd like to share my screen. So I'm going to give you show you some examples of hotels around the world that are doing this really well. So let's have a look. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see my screen. Okay, so I found the Peninsula hotels that are doing this very well. So a dedicated page with a tab at the top demonstrating their sustainability practices with videos and messages. This hotel is in Asia, I believe, and they also got a designated page telling their story about sustainability. Nice and clear, concise, easy to read. And this is one of my favorites, where they have a beautifully designed page and with information about their newly released initiatives in the form of a blog that you can read. Their long-term commitments and a video, their roadmap. We spoke about where you are now and where you want to be, and their global initiatives with showing a quantification of that. And they, they're doing it so well. They're inviting their guests to be part of this journey. Social media, their social media pages are beautifully designed with lots of stories of sustainability. That message is right through all their channels. Habitas is another fantastic example of that. And their whole website is beautifully designed, focused on spreading that message. And the last one that I wanted to show you there was Selena, and they've on their page got the ability for you also to download the ESG report, which I've got showing here in this PDF, where your investors can have a look at how you've communicated your ESG report. So, guys, the last two slides that I would like to share with you is today you would have heard a lot about some of the 4 Ps of marketing, which is how to differentiate your product as a hotel destination, the price, the place, the location, and lots of talk about how to promote that with paid advertising and so on and so forth. But I think it's well deserved that we add another P these days to help with your business differentiation. And to me, that is P for purpose. So these days, there is no doubt that businesses that have a true purpose will also separate themselves against their competitors. So in this case, we're talking about obviously sustainability, a purpose of sustainability. So I hope that you agree that a 5th B is really welcome to this group of marketing practices, models. So let me ask you, what is it going to take for you to have a sustainability tab on the homepage of your hotel's website? And is your hotel ready to raise your green fist and take on the fight against climate change? And apparently there is a fantastic seminar conference all about sustainability in your neck of the woods on the 26th of September, talking all about this. So yes, again, I am David Nicholas. You can reach out to me and talk to me about any of those communication examples on my LinkedIn. Feel free to scan this. I hope that you have a great rest of your day. And if you're there tomorrow again, fantastic. So I would like to leave you with Ka Kun, and thank you so much for having me. Good night.